Whether you like iced tea, hot tea, tea bags, loose leaf, or a non-fat chai latte, for over 2,000 years, drinking tea has been an enjoyable and refreshing part of people's lives throughout the world. In Japan, however, tea became much more than just a drink. Let's take a close look at some tea bowls in the collection of the Allen Memorial Art Museum and see how they connect to changes in Japanese culture over time and evolving ideas about what can be beautiful and in good taste. People in Japan had known about tea for hundreds of years before one type of tea became popular with elite groups. It was matcha, a powdered green tea that is put into a tea bowl, hot water is added, and a bamboo whisk is used to mix it up. It's very strong and a little bitter. Matcha was brought to Japan in the 12th century by Japanese Buddhist monks who had learned about it in China, where Chinese Buddhist monks had been drinking tea for centuries. Monks liked tea not just for the taste, but also because it helped them stay awake while meditating. The monks from Japan brought back both tea and tea plants, and farmers began to grow tea, particularly outside the city of Kyoto. Little by little, tea drinking spread, and by the 14th century, drinking tea became very popular with the ruling warrior class and aristocrats. This is the famous Golden Pavilion in Kyoto, originally made in 1397 for special tea gatherings hosted by the shogun or ruler. Yes, it is a building covered in gold, an obvious symbol of wealth, but also of how important the shogun considered these tea gatherings. Whether or not they were held in the Golden Pavilion, tea gatherings were an opportunity for the powerful to show off their rare and precious imported Chinese tea gear, such as tea bowls, water jars, and dishes. These objects were known as karamono, or Chinese things, and were considered an essential part of tea drinking at the time. This Chinese tea bowl is a good example. It is a type of pottery called jianware, named after the place where it was made in China's Fujian province, a region also known for growing tea. The conical shape of the bowl and smooth inner surface helped to make sure the tea was evenly whisked, and the thick sides helped both to keep the tea warm and to protect the hands from the heat. Dark-colored glazes like this, made from iron oxide, help to show the rich green color of the tea and the lighter-colored foam floating on top. This particular type of glaze is called hare's fur because the fine streaks of glaze look like soft rabbit's fur. To create it, the potter used a darker glaze for the body, let it dry, then dipped the edge in a lighter-colored glaze that melted and streaked down the sides during firing. But there's something very interesting about the edge of this bowl. Look closely and you can see that parts of the edge have been replaced with gold. In this bowl and in this small dish, also from China. Remember that these were not decorative objects, but were actually used by the people in tea gatherings, and accidents happen. If a rare Chinese tea bowl or dish was chipped or cracked, did you throw it away? No. And in Japan, a unique art form developed to repair broken ceramics with specially processed tree sap called lacquer, and then to highlight these repairs with powdered gold. This is known as kintsugi. Here is a later tea bowl, also repaired with kintsugi. The gold doesn't try to hide the repairs. In fact, it brings more attention to them, as if celebrating the age, use, even the very survival of the bowl. Can broken things still have their own beauty? Kintsugi says yes. The idea that something old or worn has its own beauty was very much alive in the 14th century. In his influential book, Essays in Idleness, Yoshida Kenko quoted an earlier poet who said about an old scroll, "It is only after the silk wrapper has frayed at top and bottom and the mother of pearl has fallen from the roller that a scroll looks beautiful." Yoshida noted, "This opinion demonstrated the excellent taste of the man." Yoshida Kenko clearly thought that appreciating something old and worn was in good taste. Yoshida's essay shows that around the same time the shogun was having tea parties with rare Chinese antiques and other expensive objects, a new and different set of ideas about what could be considered good taste was developing. One famous place in Japan is an example of these new ideas in their later, fully developed form. This is the Katsura Imperial Villa, just outside of Kyoto. Built in the 17th century, it was made as a place for its owners to enjoy tea. But the buildings there have a completely different feeling than the Golden Pavilion. They have a rustic quality, with undecorated wood framing geometric planes of bare walls and panels. They are natural and often irregular, but also very simple, even plain. The ideals seen in the buildings at Katsura are known in Japanese as wabi-sabi. This term combines the appreciation for old or broken things weathered by time, called sabi, with a related sense of the beauty of simplicity and austerity, or wabi. Wabi-sabi celebrates the simple, the imperfect, the irregular, and things that remind us that everything is affected by time. But how did we get from this ideal to this one? By the late 15th century, 100 years after the Golden Pavilion was built, wabi-sabi taste had become popular with wealthy merchants interested in tea who lived in big cities. Not able to compete with the power and even greater wealth of the ruling military class and their large collections of rare Chinese tea equipment, tea masters from the merchant class found another way of gaining status and prestige with tea gatherings. For them, simplicity, restraint, naturalness, the ideals of wabi and sabi were in when it came to good taste. One of the merchant's important new ideas was to see the actual making and serving of tea as itself an art, later known as the tea ceremony or chanoyu. It was a kind of careful ritual performance that could be mastered with time and practice, something that required dedication, but not a lot of expensive antiques. Also, because the merchants didn't have as many Chinese vessels to use, they began to mix in Japanese ceramics with their Chinese ceramics, sometimes using simple, everyday jars and bowls that they liked for their natural, modest look. This tea bowl is a great example. It is a type of Japanese ceramic known as rakuware. According to tradition, rakuware was created for use in the tea ceremony by a ceramic roof tile maker working with a famous tea master. Rakuware tea bowls were considered simple, humble, and unpretentious. Hand-formed and not made on a potter's wheel, they have a slightly rough texture and irregular shape and were made to fit comfortably in the hands. They also could be fired at a low temperature, so a big kiln was not necessary. Like the earliest rakuware bowls, this more recent tea bowl has a simple black glaze. But other colors were also possible with the raku process, as seen in this white rakuware tea bowl. The irregularity that is such a big part of wabi-sabi is so clear here. Look closely at the orange splotches, the small cracks around the rim, and particularly the pattern of tiny cracks in the white glaze, known as crackling. All of these are unpredictable, a product of many uncontrolled and natural events in the firing process. The radical ideas of wabi-sabi that imperfect, irregular, old, and even broken things have their own beauty have come a long way since the 15th century and are now some of the best-known Japanese artistic ideals worldwide. So much so that some Japanese artists are having a little fun with wabi-sabi. This bowl, made in 2017 by the Japanese ceramics artist Ishiyama Tetsuya, has some wabi-sabi elements. It is certainly irregular, with a rough hand-formed shape and a seemingly random collection of little finger-poked dents that the artist calls dimples. But it is completely covered with silver and gold glaze, totally contrary to the natural simplicity so typical in tea bowls. Is he challenging the wabi-sabi traditions? Or, like kintsugi, celebrating and drawing attention to the wild organic shapes of his bowl? What do you think? We've packed a lot of history and culture into this close look at 5 tea bowls and seen how a love for expensive imported antiques changed to an appreciation for the opposite, the Japanese ideals of wabi-sabi, seen here in simple, irregular, humble ceramics, and in the tradition of kintsugi that demonstrates how even broken things can still be beautiful and treasured.